It's Friday coverage here at the NFL Combine in Indianapolis. Chris Brown, Steve Tasker, and pleased to be joined now by Bills reporter Maddy Glab to kick off the show here on a Friday. Maddy has been feverishly working the podiums and lecterns where players and coaches have been speaking all week and trying to sift through a lot of the drivel that doesn't matter to give us the nuggets that do. So maybe share with us the most interesting nugget from today. We've got quarterbacks and receivers kind of cycling through today, correct?
Yeah, I've been the eyes and ears on the ground while you guys have been doing the show. I've been talking to almost all the prospects. There's 319 here. I think I've talked to about 100 by now, I want to say. We're going to hear from the running backs and the offensive linemen tomorrow, our final group that's going to talk for this 2023 NFL Scouting Combine. Heard from the wide receivers and quarterbacks today, and man, oh man, when you ask these guys about what it would be like to play with Josh Allen alongside a receiver like Stefon Diggs, their eyes light up. We heard guys say it's been a dream of mine to play with players like Josh Allen and Stefon Diggs, and there's been some connections to Stefon Diggs as well. Maryland actually has 7 players at the Combine this year, which is incredible for a program like Maryland. They have 3 wide receivers here this year, and it's cool to see guys who have played together that are now going through this process together. 2 of those wide receivers actually grew up around 30 minutes away from Stefon Diggs and have kind of used Stefon Diggs as somebody to get some advice from in terms of, should I play at Maryland? Should I try to go somewhere else? And Stefon Diggs expressed, how awesome it was to play for his hometown team, and that kind of impacted these 2 wide receivers for making a decision to play at Maryland. They said it worked out for Stefon Diggs. We believe it can work out for us as well. So it's been really cool to hear some of those nuggets from some of the wide receivers. And then you hear from a wide receiver like Jordan Addison, who has been a hot name in this draft class. And who knows if he'll be available for the Bills at number 27. But he said he grew up in a neighborhood very close to Stefon Diggs. They played in the same youth league. He went to his high school football games when he was a kid. He said he's looked up to Stefon Diggs as he was growing up, and he said it would mean so much to play alongside somebody like Stefon Diggs, who he really models his game after. So there's just been nuggets here and there, and I've said this the last couple years that we've been covering the NFL Scouting Combine, or at least that I've been a part of it with you guys. The first year I was here, coming off of the 2019 season, it was, you would ask prospects, what do you know about Buffalo? And they wouldn't know too much. Now you ask these guys about the Buffalo Bills, and like I said, they have so much to say about this team, whether it's on offense, whether it's on defense, the type of offense that this team runs. Guys want to be a part of it. Guys know it's high flying. Guys know it really it's adaptable in terms of coming out of college football and coming into the NFL based on similarities. And they like the defense. They like the defensive players that we have in our scheme. So it always gets me smiling knowing that so many of these guys would feel great to be a part of this team, a part of a team that's been a playoff contender and is looking to take that next step this season.
Why don't we move forward to the workouts from last night? Obviously, Nolan Smith almost lit the turf on fire with his 4.39 40 as a defensive end. That's insane. We were talking about comps. He ran faster than Saquon Barkley, to put it in perspective, an edge rusher. And, that's a guy that may not fit every scheme, but with a 41.5-inch vertical, among other things, he took the cake last night. Right. He's got the fastest 40 time of all people that have worked out so far, and not for nothing, the top 3 40 times last night, all SEC players. Are we surprised?
SEC speed, baby, right?
Right. He was 6'2", 238, so he's about the size of an old-time running back, but he runs like it.
He runs better.
Yeah, he's not as big. He's not as big as Derrick Henry, but he's an edge rusher, so he's a little undersized. But man, oh man, for an outside linebacker in a 3-4.
Yeah, 3-4. That's where I think he'll fit.
Yeah, and there was a great little video online of the Georgia football
of them
team
celebrating.
Yeah, back in Athens.
You can imagine. Think about it. You got your college buddies, and you're sitting there, and you like, hey, the guys are running 40s tonight. Let's turn on NFL Network and watch. So they had a video of all the guys watching, Nolan run his 40, and, the roof came off the roof. They loved it, man. It's great seeing them.
The weird thing was half of them didn't have shirts on. Like, what exactly? Were they, like, bench pressing while watching?
They might have been.
So Nolan Smith runs this 40. He comes off of the field to interview with NFL Network. Stacey Dales, I think, grabbed him, and he was visibly upset. He said he thought he ran his 40 at 85%. Then the time comes in. He sees it's a 4:39, and he lights up and is like, no, okay, we're good. We're good here.
And then the funny thing about it, too, was, as you know, everybody gets 2 cracks at a 40, and so they come around in alphabetical order again, and they're in the R's, and they're like, okay, you're stepping up to the line, you're on deck. He's like, I'm good. I'm good. I'm going to sit on the 4:39.
We don't need
Call
to
me
do
crazy.
this. So then
Good
all
move.
this chatter about these defensive linemen and these linebackers running these incredible 40 times, the wide receivers are up talking today to media, and they're asked, hey, do you feel like you guys need to step it up a notch because you have guys like Nolan Smith running a 4.39? And everybody laughed. I think Jackson Smith-Njigba was asked that question, or it must have been Zay Flowers, one of those 2 players. And they said, yeah, we've all talked about it here, and we think we got to do something because of what they put on tape and what they put on film last night.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy.
Yeah.
The 3-cone drill is a drill that measures agility, change of direction skills, and if you can run a sub-7-second 3-cone drill, you're considered to be in relatively elite company in terms of agility and change of direction skills. They had a defensive end run a sub-7-second 3-cone drill, Jose Ramirez from Eastern Michigan. I'm sorry, that's stupid. Like, edge rushers running sub-7-second 3-cone drills is insane. Lucas Van Ness, by the way, ran a 7.02, so he was right there also.
It's that time of year where these guys get to show you how ready they are, and that's why, and that's a small part, although the fun part of why they're here, to see if they are athletic enough. Most of these guys know, the league knows they're athletic enough to play at some level and be some sort of level of NFL athlete. It's all the other stuff that they're measuring or finding out about here too. We'll talk a little bit as the show goes on about guys who maybe talk their way out of getting drafted by the things that happen here in the interview process, the medical examination, let alone the physical tests they go through.
Another guy who tested pretty well yesterday was Jack Campbell, the linebacker out of Iowa, and we know this team's ties to Iowa players, A.J. Epinesa, Micah Hyde. This coaching staff likes the coaching staff over at Iowa and the way that they develop these players, and I got to listen in on Jack Campbell, and I was very impressed with what he had to say to media. He had this incredible quote where he compared playing linebacker to being a frog. Frogs have to exist on land and in water, he said. As a linebacker, I have to be able to stop the run, rush the passer, and be able to drop into coverage to stop the pass. He said you have to do so much as a frog. You also have to do so much as a linebacker. But anyways, this kid played with A.J. Epinesa. He had great things to say about A.J. Epinesa. He also grew up in the same town as Ike Bucker. The two went to high school together.
Ike Bucker's another Iowa guy.
Yeah, the two went to high school together, and he said it would be amazing to be in Buffalo to play alongside with a couple of guys that he's very familiar with. He says Ike Bucker and him are very close. They were childhood friends, basically, since they went to the same high school. So there are so many ties to guys on this team. I think we looked through every single prospect, 319 of them, to come up with ties that they have the guys on our roster and the connections, and I think you could find some connection for just about every single prospect here this weekend, especially the Florida and the Georgia kids. They have great things to say about James Cook and about Kaiir Elam. You draft an SEC guy, there's going to be a million SEC guys here every single year that you can make those connections to. So that's been really fun as well. But Jack Campbell is somebody that I've kind of started to get high on based on what he has said yesterday, a couple days ago, when he was talking to media. And then based on how he tested, too, his measurables are good, 6'4", almost 250 pounds. So if the Bills need a linebacker, if Tremaine Edmonds is not going to be a part of this team, he might be somebody that's interesting that this coaching staff could go after.
Now, a lot of things have changed since they drafted Tremaine Edmonds. A lot of things have changed. But They traded up to get him, and they wanted that guy in their defense. They felt it was that important to jump up in the first round and get him. They got him, and he has been what they wanted him to be. He's a Pro Bowl, high-level athlete, and he's now played so well, he's going to make too much money for them to keep. The connection is, if that is still an important position for this coaching staff, do they do it again and get a guy like Jack Campbell? Because they may have to trade up in the first or maybe the second to get him. Would he be worth that, or would they do that given where their roster is today? Probably not. But as free agency transpires and it gets closer and things change, maybe it is.
That's why, we were talking about that, Steve, and I think, the free agency process has to play itself out, and there is a very good list of free agent linebackers in addition to Tremaine Edmonds, where the supply could outweigh the demand.
Yes.
And maybe you can get a quote-unquote free agent bargain that takes care of that need if, in fact, you can't get Edmonds back in the fold because he's too expensive or the demand for his services are too high and the money gets ridiculous. And knowing Buffalo's cap situation, they just can't compete and get in a bidding war for somebody like Tremaine Edmonds. Maybe you get a player that's a little bit older that can cover you for a couple of years, and maybe you groom somebody else to be the eventual replacement. Because while there are linebackers in this draft, I don't know that there are enough of them for Buffalo to address that position before addressing some other more important positions that we've listed all week long: safety, interior offensive line, wide receiver. So, look, don't get me wrong. I'd love to have Jack Campbell.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I think a lot of teams would.
It's not a sexy take because you sit here and say what you really need is cheap labor.
Yeah.
It's not exciting to talk about. But it really is the reality of it when you're this far down the road into your build, and you see other teams doing it as well. The Chiefs did it last year. They jettisoned Tyreek Hill because he's just outpriced himself out of their roster. But if you can replenish, you're going to be okay. The Chiefs paid $21 million for their entire receiver corps last year. Tyreek made 30 by himself, and the Chiefs are the ones who won the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
So it's out there to be accomplished if you can find the right guys.
Jackson Smith and Jigba, you were there, right, for him?
Yes,
anything,
I was there.
Anything noteworthy out of him and what he likes to do, what he's trying to prove this week? And
he had some great things to say, just like all these guys, about the Bills and the opportunity that if it presents itself, if they're drafted by the Bills, who knows if he's going to fall that far, because he's been mocked before 27. He fell to us in one of the mock drafts that I've tracked, so we'll see that if that happens. But he said, to be able to play in a system like Josh Allen, to be able to play alongside receivers like Stephon Diggs, would really elevate the game that he's able to play. And that's something that you've heard from a lot of these wide receivers is playing in a system like the Buffalo Bills play on offense. They feel like the skill set that they had in college can really be taken to the next level when you're being mentored by players like Stephon Diggs, players like Gabe Davis, catching balls from a guy like Josh Allen. You could probably name a couple other quarterbacks that guys would list as these are the top three people I want to play with. Josh Allen is going to be right there because of what he's done in the NFL during his time with the Bills. It's also been interesting to hear from analysts this week because there's so many national media analysts here, and just to hear their take on, is it worth going after these position groups in the draft, or is it better to do that in free agency? And we've heard, and you guys have too, offensive line is a position that you could also try and address in free agency, and I can't remember who I was talking to, but somebody said based on some of the offensive linemen coming out of the draft or where the Bills are drafting, it might be better to go after offensive line in free agency because those guys are going to be ready to play right away. If you draft somebody, you kind of play the game of, and we've seen this coaching staff do this, of are they ready to play right away coming out of the college system that they played in? Are they ready to block for Josh Allen? And are they ready to go up against some mean, nasty defensive lines that we see in the NFL and that we see in the AFC East? Safety was also a position group that I was told there's going to be free agents available too.
Yep.
There are some in the draft. Where are they going to go? There are some good guys who could go pretty high. Brian Branch is out of Alabama. He's a safety. I asked him about playing in Buffalo's system. He said Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer are two players that he likes to watch tape of. Jordan Poyer, obviously a free agent, but being able to play alongside players like that would be awesome. So it's cool to hear a lot of these guys name a bunch of players off of our roster and be familiar with them.
Yeah, the safety class isn't terribly strong by most of the accounts we have heard here. And so, again, you got – I mean, it's incumbent upon Brandon Beane to survey the free agent landscape at the position, and there are a lot of options there as well. And we'll talk about some of those with Greg Cosell later on in the show when we have him on. But, again, to me, that's a free agent position where you say the pool is plentiful in free agency. After the top two guys get the big money, that's the time to kind of swoop in and talk to a guy who's gotten maybe one or two phone calls throughout the entire first week of free agency and is like, I'm not getting the money I thought I was going to get. What the heck? That's when the Bills can swoop in and be like, hey, we'd love to have you here. Here's what we can do for you. We can't pay you $10 million a year, but we can pay you 6 or 7.
That alludes to what it
and when
really
the phone's not ringing, that's suddenly appealing.
Right. That alludes to how it really is, because we talk about how the free agent market is plentiful, how the draft class is a little bit thin. Here's the thing. There's 32 individual clubs. There's all these free agents, and each one of them is individual in their needs and their wants and their abilities to pay and their budget and the wishes of the player, the experience and the age of the player. Every case, while we generalize here at these tables and we do it all week here in this thing, it's all an individual transaction with one guy who's got his own agenda. And it may have very little to do with money for this guy, and it has everything to do with money for another guy.
Yeah.
You got to really sift through a lot of conversations with a lot of different people and find out the one that fits you best.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's any question, because of the generalizations we're talking about, the Bills are going to sign some guys in the back end of their secondary. I don't think there's any question about it. There are too many guys out there who have proven track records for the Bills to spend like the 27th pick on a safety, or even the 54th pick on a safety. I don't think they'll do that. This is the kind of year, even though it's, I'm telling you, every guy's different. There's a guy out there that is perfect for what the Bills want to do. I wouldn't be surprised if they pull off another Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer signing when free agency starts. Guys like, who did he play for? Those kind of guys. Yeah. That's the way we work with Micah and Jordan.
Mm-hmm.
The team's
back in 2017.
The team is going to know, and they're going to pull out these names, and they're going to be perfect fits for what they want to do.
How big, Maddie, does Darnell Washington look? Did you get to see him?
Oh, my gosh.
6'7",
I walked
275.
up to the table that he was going to be at before he got there, and somebody that I knew that covered Georgia football said, just wait till you see him in person. He's even bigger in person than you would imagine based on his measurables, 6'7".
Like 275.
Yes.
Yeah.
He had to lean over to talk into the mic. He is a huge, huge dude. He talked about playing almost every single position as he was younger because you have this size, and of course he grew into what he was playing in. But he said he started off like playing some wide receiver. He also played on the offensive line. He played on the defensive line. He pretty much played everywhere and finally found a home at tight end. Massive dude. I kind of would like to see somebody that big on the Buffalo Bills squad.
Yeah,
right.
I mean, he's a guy worth talking about just because he's an athletic. I don't know if I would call him an athletic freak. He's just measurable-wise, yes, he is. Athleticism-wise, I think he's like a build-up speed kind of guy because his legs are so long, he can't pick him up and put him down in an explosive fashion, which I think would kind of be expected. The guy's so long.
Yeah.
I mean, his levers are so long, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I mean, even Tremaine would have to deal with that because his limbs are so long that, to be quick-footed is very hard for those guys. But he's athletic. I mean, hurdling people against Oregon in week 1 this past season after making a catch out on the sideline, hurdling linebackers, that gets people's attention.
The thing that's different, I think, for him and that sets him apart, we always see guys that are kind of like that, but, it's hard to stand out physically in a room full of guys who stand out physically.
Yeah.
Where do we go back to? Every year they draft the traits at the top of the draft.
Yeah.
This guy has some of those traits. He called himself the most unique tight end in this year's draft class. I think it's also been interesting to hear from people on the outside and their thoughts on the Bills overall. I think we still live in the day and in the months of coming out of this season that didn't end the way we wanted it to. We wanted it to go longer. And you have questions leaving a season like this, and it's been nice and almost soothing to hear from national media people and to hear their take on this team and the fact that the Bills are still really great. They're a couple pieces away. They're going to be just as good, if not better, next season. Nothing to worry about. They have Josh Allen. They have those core pieces. They need to get a couple more in free agency and through the draft, but if they can hit on some of that, then we're looking at a team who's going to be better than they were last year.
Yeah, schedule's pretty challenging. Got the AFC West this year. That's not going to be easy. NFC East this year. So their schedule's pretty tough. Especially knowing you've got road games at Philly, at Cincy, at Kansas City. That's a tough road to hoe there. Although I will say, I think Philadelphia's roster is going to look decidedly different because they have more free agents than the Bills do, and the Bills have 22. I think Philly has 24. A lot of expiring contracts, a lot of older players that are going to get overturned with some young players coming in. So be very interesting to see what all of these teams look like by the time we get to September. But for right now, yeah, I don't think the holes on Buffalo's roster are insurmountable by any stretch. And we know that Brandon Beane has retooled the roster before with great success. I think we all anticipate that he and his personnel department will be able to do it again. We have to take a break here. Maddie, thanks for giving us the 411 on the players. I know you'll be hitting it for a couple of more days here, so you keep doing your stuff and filling us in on Twitter at Maddy Glab. We'll keep an eye on that, as well as BuffaloBills.com through the weekend.